All right. Yes, perfect. Forecast. If you take a look at the dollar, the story is going to be the same thing again, where it's currently just quite calm, right? So I always mention as well that these days are really great case studies for if you are not convinced yet on the news factor, then you can see how important news is as well for the US dollar right here. So very important that I'm still waiting for CPI to happen. So most of the pairs and most of the instruments that we have right there, I don't really have anything to add on to than what was already said yesterday. So nothing really changes in that sense as well, because simply I'm waiting for CPI to then react to whatever I'm going to do at that moment in time. So here I am still waiting. And for example, if CPI does something like this, for example, then I did nothing. I didn't lose any money, and I still waited for CPI. Perfectly fine. So then I look to follow through on the one for Vega, for example. So it's really like whatever the market is currently doing for me is completely irrelevant, because I know CPI is either going to agree with my over ID or going to disagree, and either way I'm going to follow CPI's intentions. So it's purely waiting for CPI as well in this moment in time. And that's what you'll see a lot in a week like this. Now on ES right here, same exact thought process where I'm still bullish. I do quite like that we have created the daily value gap. That's quite nice, to be honest. Can we trade into the daily value gap? This is a very interesting phenomenon, and I have not gone over this just yet because I'm still, well, not studying it myself, but I fully wanted to work it out in my mind as well. And I'll share it already with you here. We might do some deep work sessions on it. That we have a breakaway gap, and I'm going to touch on the breakaway gap in finishing touch video as well, which will be online tomorrow. But we have a breakaway gap, and we also have a breakaway gap where we do expect to continue low right there, coming to the daily value gap. But I would argue that at this moment in time, look at the same situation, as in look at this wick right there. That's a very long wick. For that to now come back into that daily value gap to then continue higher, it's very weird, because what happens on the lower time frame there? On the lower time frame, that looks something like this, where we have this, we have a move lower, a pretty hefty move lower. All of a sudden we have a rejection higher right there again, and then we need to come back below again to then continue higher. Doesn't make a lot of sense to me. So here, it would not really surprise me if we do already continue higher off of that. Again, just a thought process where we already sort of use these fair value gaps. We tried to push higher above these highs right there. Didn't create a new 4-hour fair value gap. So I can also see the bearish arguments overall. It just, if we were to continue higher, I would not necessarily expect a retracement into that daily value gap, if that makes sense. But again, we'll see what happens. Might be a great case study as well. Then on NASDAQ, same as ES, overall I'm still bullish, right? So that is something we need to understand. Even ES, NASDAQ, I'm overall still bullish. So with ES, I'm not saying we're going lower if that does happen, but overall I am still bullish. So I'm just preparing myself that if we do already continue higher here without coming into the daily value gap, then that does make sense in my point of view. So on NASDAQ, let's see. On NASDAQ right here, daily value gap as well. Same story, where it's a pretty hefty retracement to make to then continue higher. So here on the 4-hour value gaps could already be respected right there. We would have to see what equities open as well wants to do right there. If equities open already shows our entry pattern coming into a 4-hour value gap, perfect. Let's get involved off of that. YM, I wouldn't really want to trade YM. I would, if I were to trade any indices, it would be ES, NASDAQ, or DAX. But YM, going to stay on the sidelines right here, where on YM I would argue, well, we can potentially still look to trade into the weekly value gap. Then on DAX right here, this is also quite interesting, because as you know, of course, we had a quite nice setup yesterday, but what we're seeing right now is that we did not create a new daily value gap higher off of that. And I would have liked to see that, because now the only daily value gap that we had actually was a bearish one. So that creates more bearish arguments based on the daily than bullish arguments. So that right there is somewhat of a concern to me. So right here, I want to be a little bit more careful, and I want to wait for value gaps higher as well to confirm the idea again. Then on Australian dollar, US dollar, This is purely, and I'm going to go over this quite fast because I don't really have anything to add on to here. This is purely still waiting for CPI to happen to then see, all right, what do we actually want to do? Same for EU, consolidation, which of course we already saw coming as well. GU, same exact situation where GU on the 4-hour was quite clean. Now we can also see that it just didn't have that intention, right? It didn't have that gasoline in the car to support that idea. It didn't have that fuel to actually continue higher. So that is very important. This is why news is so important, because price is always going to be nice. As in, price, some way or another, is always going to make sense. You can always make sense of price. What is a differentiator again? That's time. Very important to remember. New Zealand dollar, US dollar, same exact thing. USD Canadian dollar right here came into the weekly value gap. Would be interesting to see what we do right here. If we create that 4-hour ST before CPI, we could see CPI just continue lower right there with USD Canadian dollar as well. Could be very interesting. US dollar CHF right here. Still nothing for us to do right here. Still waiting. US dollar JPY, same exact thing where we were sweeping those highs, but we are not really continuing lower right here. So I also don't want to do anything right now. Silver and both gold, same exact story, just waiting for that volatility to come into the market. Bitcoin, let's see. Almost reached that swing high. Now, this is where it is quite important to understand that if you are trading Forex, for example, overall the brokers are going to be quite similar. CFDs and futures, so futures, ES, NASDAQ, depending on the contract you're at, but if you are on the right contract, then they're also going to be perfect, as in it's going to be the exact price action that you're looking at. Bitcoin, I believe I'm looking at a Bybit chart, if I'm not mistaken. So that means that on Binance, for example, or any other broker, we might have already taken those swing highs. That is a tricky situation right there, where if I'm looking at Bybit itself and I'm looking at Bitcoin, it is a little bit different from Forex. If I was trading Forex or the indices, I can confidently say, I would argue, and I would probably say, we are close to the drawn liquidity. Do we have a fair value gap higher already? We can look to continue higher off of that. But on Bitcoin, I am not too sure what the actual real price action at that moment in time is. So swing highs, if they get close to it, they might get swept on different brokers. They might not get swept on this broker, for example. So here I want to be a little bit more careful. That could be a sweep and we could have already reached the target right there and could now just continue lower. So that is very important to understand as well, where if we take a look at Binance, actually, let's see what it is telling us right there. Did not take the high just yet. And I'm not going to go over every broker, but we can look at different brokers as well, where we might have already taken the high. Let's see, this broker, this is a broker where we did take the high. So that is exactly what I mean. Then the question is, all right, well, what is the actual price action, right? So that is something we have to take into account. Don't have to take that into account for Forex mainly. Is going to be quite similar. Yes, here and there a slight difference. The slight difference as well adds on to the story, as in it's even if you create bearish arguments, we are likely going to get to the same outcome regardless. So that is still very important to understand, where we can still look to continue higher off of fair value gaps higher right there as well. Crude oil, let's see where we have this. What happened? That was COVID, I believe, right? It is crazy price action. Let's see. On the weekly is what we went over. Daily created that expansion phase, but again, it was kind of weird because I also did not see that coming, to be honest, that expansion phase lower right there. And if anything, I would like to see a daily fair value gap higher to get into the month fair value gap right there. And when you have that price action that you do not see coming, and this is something from my experience as well, when that happens, where you did not see it coming, or it's just very odd, as in, why are we all of a sudden creating a new daily fair value gap right there? That's my thought process. I didn't see it happen, very easily said. So at that moment in time, it's also not something I would want to trade. I would like to trade price action where I saw it coming, because that makes it high probability, right? It makes it very easy to actually trade, to anticipate. I already saw this coming. I already imagined it in my dreams. So I can dream of it. It's already made up in my mind exactly what I need to do right there. where crude oil was just a bit weird. So at that moment in time, I also want to take a step back. And here I just simply want to wait for daily fair value gap higher or a daily fair value gap lower. And on Nifty, what are we seeing? Nifty, again, nothing much going on. I also want to wait right here. The short list, Euro GBP. So if we do take a look at Euro GBP, we came into the 4-hour fair value gap sitting right there. And let me actually quickly take a big peek at news. All right, so yes, we have GBP news going into today, so into Wednesday. So currently, we can also see that we're not really continuing lower off of that 4-hour fair value gap. Perfect. If we get news supporting the ID, that could be the volatility drive. That could be the time where we can now look to potentially continue lower. So here, I would also want to wait, even on the 1 hour potentially, to wait for clear fair value gaps going lower again. All right, if we look at GBP Australian dollar, then right here, we mentioned again this high, which if we get fair value gaps back above that high, I would not want to look at shorts anymore. Now, this is again a tricky situation where I do not like the way the stop formed, as in it's not ideal. I want to see an immediate ST going lower as well, which we're not getting. So here for me, still waiting, and I'm even going to put it on the waiting list where I'm just not interested right now. US dollar CHF is what we mentioned, nothing much going on right now. Euro CHF as well, still waiting for our area to be hit. Longs, Australian dollar CHF. So here we got a 4-hour ST, which we, by the looks of it, are slowly respecting right now. So that could be very interesting to look at 4-hour fair value gaps to then continue higher off of that as well. Very interesting price action. Australian dollar, US dollar, we went over. Australian dollar JPY, we finally have new 4-hour fair value gaps going higher. So if we have Australian dollar news, then we can look at the 4-hour fair value gap right there to continue higher. That's very nice price action. I do quite like that. New Zealand dollar, US dollar, we went over as well. Not super interesting right now. And then for the waiting list, CHF JPY. So here we are finally, by the looks of it, getting 4-hour fair value gaps higher. So we can definitely look to potentially as well continue higher off of that right now. So that could potentially be quite interesting as well. Let me add it to the long list. GBP JPY. Let's see. Here we are very close to the drawn liquidity. So tomorrow, this is very interesting actually. This is very interesting, and this is going to go at the top of my interest list as well. And I'll tell you why. If currently, and we are in Asia session, if we can currently, the coming hours, consolidate, and we can set price action up to trade back into a 4-hour fair value gap right there that is being created. Meaning that this next candle right there is one of the last candles that is going to open, is the last candle actually that is going to close before we approach London session. So at that moment in time, I do not want this candle that is currently forming to close above this high ideally, because that sets London up to have a very easy path to trade back into the 4-hour fair value gap, to then combined with GBP news tomorrow morning, continuing higher off of that as well. That is very interesting price action, and I really like that, with the drawn liquidity being that close, continuing higher off of that, what is it, weekly or daily fair value gap? Daily fair value gap. That is very interesting price action, and I like that a lot, to be honest. All right, if we go back to the waiting list, GBP Australian dollar is what we just put on the waiting list as well. So my eyes currently, I would argue, if we can get something on GBP JPY, that would be very interesting. I would be very interested in that in a London session as well. Perfect. Thank you.